Hey, everybody, and welcome aboard the Blue Heart webcast. I want to thank you all for being here. So, I guess the best place to start is we're going to talk about something as law enforcement officers. You might think, well, I'm never going to come across that, so why do I care? And that is understanding the psychosexual drives and early warning signs of serial killers. Now, I think it's an interesting topic, first of all. Whether or not you'll ever come across somebody like this, I don't know. I think these people are out there. FBI statistics tell us that there are probably 50 active serial killers at any given time working across the country. Now, some of these we believe are using trucks to get across the country. They drive across the country, they don't leave a lot of trail. They're from town to town to town. Could be your town that they come through and they commit their violence or do whatever they're going to do. Right? We have people in our communities that are covering every range of criminal activity. It doesn't matter where you are, what your community is. We know these people are out there. So the reason that I think it's important for all of us, whether you're a patrol officer, detective, supervisor, big town, little town, doesn't matter. These people come across our communities. Look at some of the famous ones. Ted Bundy. This guy was out in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and then in the Pacific Northwest is where he did most of his damage. But he ended up in Florida at a college where he killed several women and where he was finally eventually caught. So this guy traveled all over the place. Who knows who else he killed? There's one that's been on Netflix now for a while. Is the story? I think it's Netflix. The story of Ed Gein, one of the original farmer serial killers, and had all these people killed. You had John Wayne Gacy killing young men and burying them under the floor of his house. And how many times do we see these people who have these psychosexual desires and they've captured people and they keep them in their basement? They tie them up. They build a bunker in Long Island, of all places. In Long Island, there was a guy who kidnapped a young girl next door and kept her in a bunker under his house so that he could abuse her sexually. We have the Long Island serial killer. This guy out there that was killing these women and dumping them along Gilgo Beach. These people can be anywhere and everywhere, and you never know when you're going to come across them. So one of the things I can tell you, and I in a previous episode I did talk about this one. We had a woman in our town, and our town was nice. It's a seashore-ish community. We're right next to Asbury Park, New Jersey, which everybody knows Asbury because of Bruce. And it was a nice community. We had $1 million homes and we had some rental areas. We had a lot of apartment complexes, no-tell motels. We had shopping malls, a general, really innocuous kind of a community. And in our town, we had a woman who was a prostitute and she was working out of one of the no-tell motels. And she got picked up by somebody one night and she never came home. Well, a month or two later, her body was found in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, where somebody had taken her, physically abused her, cut out parts of her sexual organs, and then dumped her. Now, who cuts out people's sexual organs and then takes off? This is not a first timer. It's not somebody that came up with this on their own. So I think at the time, and I worked on the case, I think at the time there was a thought that this might have been a traveling serial killer. She was picked up off of Highway 35, which is prior to, big interstates. Highway 35 was one of the main trafficked roads throughout all of New Jersey. So, and there's lots of trucks on Route 35 coming and going, delivering, products. So the thought was maybe it was a truck driver who picked her up, did what he did to her, and then dumped her and kept on going. But the reality is that ended up in our town. So that's why I tell you these things. All right, so let's talk about our sponsors here first. Blue360media.com, publishers of everything you need in law enforcement, right? Including my books, The Interview, which is going to teach you how to do a good interview, and over here, The Investigation. I'll tell you more about what we're doing with training soon, but I'm not going to talk about it now. But go there for everything you need, especially go get my books. And then you have RiotTint.com. Riot Tint is a company that makes window film, safety window film that keeps bad people from getting in and hurting your schools and businesses. And we still don't have a sign yet, but they are excellent people. MedicalEssentialDiagnostics.com. I recently did a show with one of the principals there, Brianna, and with Chief Duff, who what they do is they give you a health screening at no cost to you if you're a police officer, first responder, teacher, somebody who works for government in New Jersey. And this guy found out that he had multiple blockages. He would have just died, right? So go see the sponsors, medicalessentialdiagnostics.com and these guys. And I mention them because they're helping to bring this show to you so they can bring this information to you. All right, so if you find this interesting, if you find the idea of serious, now, right now you might be a patrol officer and you're saying, what do I care? I'm never going to work. Well, you might find yourself transferred, promoted, whatever they do in your agency, into the position of detective. You might move to another agency where you end up working on something, go to a county agency or state or federal agency. We do move around in our careers. And you may end up working on one of these things, right? So it's good to have some ideas, because if we take away the serial killer part and we just say psychosexually driven criminals and go back and watch the episode where I talked about want crimes and drive crimes, this is going to help you understand these people. It'll expand your understanding of the criminal element and what we're dealing with out there. All right, so I wrote an article on it. All right, it's been published in several places in law enforcement. If you'd like a copy of it, you can email me, joe@pangarotraining.com. Hey, Lieutenant Joe, I'd like a copy of that article. All right, or you can Google it. It's out there wherever it's been published. All right. So I'm not going to read the article, but I'm going to read from the article to kind of keep us on time here. All right. So what I talk about is the introduction. Serial killers have fascinated and horrified society forever. That's true, right? You look at all these movies, all these things now. If you go on one of these streaming services, there's entire sections about serial killers, because it's unbelievable to think that these people walk amongst us and what they're doing out there. All right, so sexually motivated killers, also referred to as lust killers. That's what, they're lusting. Well, in my book, The Investigation, I talk about want crimes and drive crimes. And this is why you need to go back and see that episode, right? And get the book. A want crime are crimes that people do when they want something. They want money, they want drugs, they want something, so they commit a crime, a burglary, a street robbery. They do something like that so they can take care of their want at the moment. If they see a cop car, they're not going to do the crime because they want things, but they don't want to go to jail, right? So they don't do it. A drive crime, on the other hand, are crimes that motivate people to do things that they can't stop themselves from doing. Serial killers, serial rapists are these kind of people. Psychosexual criminal minds are the people that cannot stop the thoughts from coming into their head, and eventually they have to act on them. Now, these people might act on them once and then wait a long time to build up the tension again, and then they do it again, or they might do a whole bunch in a row and then disappear for a long period of time, and all of a sudden those crimes stop, and we look at that and go, well, the person's either dead or in jail. But the reality of no matter what it is, they're dead or they're in jail. They don't just stop, because it's a drive that they're driven to do these things. That's why we're scared to death to ever let these people out, because we know they will offend again. They will commit more crime. And a lot of them will tell you that. If I get out, I'm going back to this, because it's a drive. So you need to understand want crimes and drive crimes. All right, so let's see. Lust killers. I don't really like that name because it's a drive. It's lust. Lust indicates that they're doing it for sexual reasons. You're lusting after this person. You have to have them. And really, it's about power. It's about controlling someone else. It's about playing, not playing God, but in the way of having that total control over another person. Not only are you going to grab them and control where they go, you're going to control what happens to them. You're going to control their bodies. And in many cases, you see when they take these people and they hide them and lock them up, it's so that they can have them available when they want them. That is total control over another human being. And you'll see a lot of these people when they do decide they're going to kill them, it's, to keep them from testifying, right? You can't testify if you're dead. But a lot of times it's that complete control over that person to the point of taking their life, sexually violating them against their will to feed their own desires of power, and then taking their life, the ultimate power over another person, right? So we have to understand this. And these drives come to us in lots of different ways, not just serial killers. You see some of these people that are driven as rapists to do things. I think I told you the story. One of my first cases as a detective was a guy who was raping elderly women. And it was bizarre that somebody would do it. That's actually a drive. That's a drive they have. There's a reason that they're attacking elderly women and sexually assaulting them. We had a guy who died death by misadventure. He had wrapped himself in all kinds of stuff to constrict himself and constrict his breathing. He put a helmet on, and then he had one of them blow up vests. And when he blew up the vest, it tightened, it choked him to death and killed him because that was his sexual fetish. That was his drive. He had to do this. So these things are important. So what are some early warning signs and red flags? All right, so we want to look at some of these. Criminologists and people have come up with this over the years, and we're going to look at some of these. All right, childhood trauma. How many times do we have to hear this? Childhood trauma. You know, many of us had childhood traumas of varying levels. Some of us had childhood traumas that were small, little things. Maybe you got bullied, you got picked on, and that changed the way you saw the world. Other people might have had big childhood traumas where they were abused physically, mentally, sexually. And that changes their relationships for the rest of their lives. So we can't discount childhood trauma. So if you're dealing with someone who's is experiencing a younger person and you're locking them up constantly, or they're getting in trouble, or they're starting to say and do things, expressing themselves in writing or online, they're making statements, we got to go back and see what was that trauma. Now, I did a program for our other podcast, the school safety podcast, Hope is Not a Tactic. It's also on YouTube. You can find it. I did a program there on childhood trauma, understanding childhood trauma when we see it. Teachers see it because they're right with these kids every day, often more than their parents. All right. So we want to take a look at childhood trauma. So if you have a kid that's always a problem, you need to look a little closer, right? First, it's the right thing to do for the kid. But number two, you could be preventing somebody from acting out in the future that is even worse, becoming a serial offender, doing bad things. All right, so we want to look at those things. Controlling their impulses becomes Todd. The McDonald Triad. McDonald Triad. All right, this is a set of 3 behavioral patterns observed in the early lives of many serial killers. Persistent bedwetting past age 5. Lieutenant Joe, what does bedwetting got to do with somebody kidnapping somebody and raping them and killing them? Well, the reason that they say past age 5, remember, words mean things. Investigation takes a lot of thinking, right? We got to understand people and how they function if we really want to understand what's going on. All right, past age 5, bedwetting, and if you've had children and you understood what it was like to transition them from diapering to not using a diaper, we know that for some kids it's really easy because they have to control their bodies, control their thoughts, control their minds. And to understand that that is a part of all of us. We all have to use the bathroom, and developing proper bathroom habits, eliminating waste from our system, is very important. When you go past age 5, bedwetting can be an indicator that there's some kind of trauma going on because they're not controlling it, or they're trying to control their environment around them. You know, mommy and daddy say, hey, you're old enough now, you shouldn't be wetting your pants. You change the kid and they want to have control over you, so they wet their pants again, right? Oh, sorry, I had an accident, because they want to make you do things. So bedwetting past age 5 is more of a purposeful act in many cases. Doctors that are sitting out there listening, I know it's not every case. I'm not saying that. In many cases, when it comes to crime, bedwetting past age 5 can be an indicator, not of being a serial killer, but of a personality situation that's going on that could develop into worse things. So bedwetting is part of that. Cruelty to animals. Now, I think we all heard about this kind of a thing. The kid that kills kittens, right? We had a kid when I was a little kid here in this, it's beautiful here, right, where I live. And this kid who was a little off, we thought he was, he was a little weird, a little off, found a family of wild feral kittens, just been born, not too old, out in the woods, and he killed them all. Why? At the time, all the parents, I remember being freaked out. I remember as a kid looking at this kid for, again, going, why would he kill kittens? Kittens, animals are innocent. I'm not talking about the bear that comes into your tent to eat you. So you gotta have common sense here. Little kittens, little birds, little ducks, little puppies, all these innocent little animals that are out there, killing them, injuring them, being cruel to them. The reason it can be an indicator is think about that power that person is exhibiting or expressing against that animal. It's a way of expressing maybe rage or some kind of twisted thinking, but you're hurting an innocent little animal that can't fight back, and you have power over that animal. You are inflicting pain, you're inflicting terror, and then you're killing it. So you see, bedwetting, right, and cruelty to animals is two of the McDonald triad. And a fascination with fire setting. Now we're starting to see this triad, and there's many more things that we can look at. But when we look at this triad, fire starters, there's programs in most of our communities for fire starters. Why are people drawn to fire? And I don't want to sound philosophical, but you ever sit around a campfire and people stare into the fire? It can be hypnotic. Fire is, what is fire? What is fire? Is it a power? Is it an energy source? I don't know. We don't really know exactly what it is, but it is fascinating. And to sit there, it can be calming, it can be soothing, or it can be a thing of destruction, fire, right? So you got a kid who's constantly starting fires, lighting fires, being cruel to animals, right? And bedwetting past the age of 5. You have some indicators in many, many serial killers. These are the big three that we will often see in younger ages that can lead us to say the child is having some kind of problem that some kids they'll develop out of it. Some kids can go to therapy and get out of it. And other kids, it develops into other kind of mental problems. So understanding as the investigator, when you come across people with these kind of problems, you got to say, is there something bigger going on in their lives? And where is it going to lead? And if you have suspects that are doing things, now older adult suspects, that are committing certain kind of crimes where there's cruelty involved, where there's fire involved, right? Where there's other kind of psychosexual things going on. Those could be drives that could eventually at some point push them to go even further. That's why we need to understand this as law enforcement officers. All right. Can we predict and prevent? Identifying potential serial killers before they act remains one of the greatest challenges for law enforcement. That's why I'm telling you, you want to pay attention to the calls you're going on, the people that you're arresting. Most of them are want crimes. That's what we deal with mostly. We deal with people who do things because they want something. They're covetous of somebody's property. Porch pirates see an opportunity. Burglars see an opportunity to go in and steal your stuff, get some money, right? Most crimes we deal with are want crimes. The concerns we have is when we come across people who have drive crimes. Those drive crimes can be annoying. Those drive crimes can be dangerous. And those drive crimes can be deadly, right? So as law enforcement officers, we have an obligation to understand what we're dealing with here, right? So psychosexual drives and early warning signs of serial killers. It's not just about serial killers. There's a lot going on here, and every single one of us needs to understand this. So remember, Joe at pangarotraining.com. Hey, Lieutenant, I'd like a copy of the article. I will send it to you. Remember our sponsors and look in the show notes for this episode, and I will have my email in there and some other references to these things. All right. I want to thank you all for being here. This is interesting stuff. And as an investigator, you want to get good at it. See you down the road. Be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. See you around.